Okay, so we're recording. That looks good. I'd like to say hello and welcome to everybody for coming to London DevOps meetup number 60. I think it's the 11th one we've done virtually. It's been more than a year we've been thrust out of the lovely venues that we managed to find and that our co-organisers and sponsors and other associated friends managed to find for us and start doing this from the comfort of our living room. Not the same experience, obviously, as a full physical meetup, but we're very pleased that we've been able to carry on throughout the pandemic and still do London DevOps, if virtually. Can't wait to meet all of you for a beer at some point. Sounds like it's coming soon. I'm quite excited about getting out of the house on next week, and hopefully it's the beginnings of things getting a bit more back to normal, whatever that means. So, as I said, welcome to London DevOps number 60. Here we are. What's DevOps, I hear you ask? Well, maybe if you're on London DevOps and you already know what DevOps is, but I have opinions, like everybody does, on what DevOps means. This is one of the good definitions that I like. I go through these introductory slides every time that we meet because there are people who are new to the meetup, haven't been on before, and for those of us who have been on a few, some good reminders of what we're here to do. So we traditionally talk about DevOps in these terms, DevOps being a culture where people, regardless of title or background, work together to imagine, develop, deploy, and operate a system. Thanks to Ken McGratty from ThoughtWorks for that definition. This definition as well, a little more blunt. Not passing the buck. Working in DevOps is a lot of what we end up doing is around liaising between teams and taking ownership of things. So giving a shit about all your job enough to want to learn all the arts and not just your little world. DevOps is about culture, as much about culture as it is about tools, from Mandy, who very generously spoke on our meetup last month. I would argue it's even more about culture than it is about tools. But for a lot of people, myself included, DevOps means this, a big infinity loop in the middle of getting continuous feedback, continuous integration, continuous everything into your organization so that you're flowing in a circle all the way around from dev to test to live and back again, feedback loops everywhere with lots of pieces of software, lots of tools around the edges to help you go along your way. So London DevOps is here as a group for these reasons. It's here basically to share knowledge, meet new people, a little harder on the virtuals, of course, but please do say hello to your fellow inmates in the meetup. And yeah, we're here to help, and we're here to help you all help others. Everything is shareable unless you hear otherwise. So yeah, nothing's to be secret that we're going to go through tonight, unless any of the speakers or the panelists say otherwise. Everything that we do is recorded and appears in a relatively, well, actually I say relatively quick time, but usually relatively quickly onto our YouTube channel. You can see the whole, well, most of the, coming up for 7 years of history of London DevOps is up there. Thanks to the many videographers that we've used in the past, mostly Mark, and also Zoom. Recording Zoom meetings isn't very difficult, so that bit's been easy for us for the last few meetups. So if you hear anything that you want to go and replay, or if you want to share with your colleagues or friends or neighbours or cat or dog afterwards, or if you just want to go back and look at some other stuff, you'll find it on our YouTube channel there, London DevOps YouTube channel. There's the code of conduct. Again, this is something we believe in very thoroughly. You may have noticed that the quote that I put up right at the very start from Ken encompasses having proper diversity in developing and operating and imagining systems. It's something we believe very, very strongly in. It never fails to depress me that there's the four of us basically old white men running this meetup, which isn't really what I want, because it's not reflective of the teams that we want to be building or the community we want to build. So actually that's only tangentially related to the code of conduct, but the code of conduct is there. It's a serious thing. Haven't had to eject anyone from a Zoom meetup yet for violating the code of conduct, but we have ejected people from the physical meetups, and won't hesitate to do so should we need to. So I'll just leave that there for a minute. So here's our 4 depressingly old white male organisers. Again, if you want to help out with this meetup and you don't reflect the racial and age and gender mix that you see here, then please do get in touch. But yeah, here are the 4 organisers of the meetup. So Mark, I don't think he's quite around here. He's actually managing to. He needs to get either a 3D printer or a duplicating machine and make a copy of himself, because I believe he's participating in a meetup or an online session for his employer right now. So I'm not sure he's here right now, but he will be here later on. So yeah, Mark's there. He works for HashiCorp, does some great work in their solutions teams. This is me, the second one in, Matt. So yeah, I run DevOps, well, a DevOps area at the very best Atlassian partner, of which more later. Third organizer is Jack. Say hello, Mr. Moore.
Hi, everyone. That's a very dated, slimmer photo of me there. But yeah, thanks everyone for coming tonight. Good to see everyone.
Thanks, Jack. Maybe I can just adjust the PowerPoint and just do that with all of our images. I think it's probably for the best. No, we don't, just go the other way, don't I? Anyway. Yes, Jack and Moore is here today. Hammond, that was Jack just speaking. And finally, Alex Dover. Do you want to say hello, Alex?
Hi guys. Thanks for coming. And Matt, I'm going through a bit of a rebranding at the moment, so I think we need to update that to Alex DevOps Dover. So.
Oh, I'm going to put that before the committee, I think. So there you go. Welcome from Mark DevOps Cluett, Matt DevOps Saunders, Jack DevOps Moore, and Alex DevOps Dover. Okay, so please do send out some social stuff. We don't usually get a huge amount of this, but it's good to have some conversations that outlast the actual meetup. There's a hashtag London DevOps. So if you want to tweet, if you're doing that sort of thing, then stick that one on there, and we'll interact with you there. We'd love to see as many people as possible doing that. So sponsorship, we couldn't really do these meetups, especially in the physical world, without the help of our sponsors. So again, over to DevOps Dover to just say a few words about Prism Digital.
Sure. So I'm a founder of Prism. We're a small consultancy talent partner focusing at purely the DevOps cloud and a bit of infrastructure marketplace. And yeah, that's us really. So if you're looking for work in the arena, or if you're looking to hire, get in touch. Be happy to talk to you and just talk about the market in general.
Any DevOps in there?
A little bit DevOps.
Adaptivist, I work for Adaptivist. So I'm, I think, kind of the head of internal DevOps at Adaptivist. So I work in our platforms team, basically joining teams together and sorting out collaboration, people, process and tools, all that sort of stuff for Adaptivist. Big Atlassian partner, we're also diversifying into other things such as GitLab, just on a partnership with them, Slack. So if you've got professional services needs or needs for doing products in those sort of worlds, then please do get in touch. Next to last is Weshape. Jack.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Just a quick hello. So yeah, Weshape, we're a technology consultancy focusing in the kind of DevOps and cloud native space. I'm one of the founders here. But yeah, so we work with customers from kind of technical and business advisory all the way down to kind of project implementation. We do training and coaching as well, but one of the cheesy lines that you probably hear on these events is we are hiring as well for contractors and permanent staff here at Weshape. So yeah, drop me a line if you're interested to learn more. But yeah, thanks again for coming.
And Jack, you have the most authentic looking Weshape office background there. It's
Yes.
extremely impressive. I can't see any evidence of green screen there. Cool. So today's talks. So we're going to focus on DevSecOps in more ways than one this evening. So yes, this meeting is focused around DevSecOps. As you may know, if you've attended some of these meetups in the past, for the last year and a half or so, we've tried to kind of theme the meetups generally by having a keynote talk and then either a panel session or an open mic type thing, or having a number of talks that are closely aligned along a particular theme. So tonight we're going to talk about DevSecOps. We're very, very lucky to have Glenn talking tonight. Glenn Wilson, famous author. Yes, thanks, Mark, for that. And we're going to follow that with a panel session with Glenn, with Michael Mann, and a couple of other very distinguished DevSecOps people. So thank you to those people for volunteering to speak. So finally, yeah, just tell us what you think. If you loved the meetup, but more interestingly, if you didn't like it, or if there was something you think we could do better, or some way of, if you're interested in speaking, if you're interested in being a panelist, any of those sort of things, all feedback is very constructively taken. You can either do it through the meetup page, you can tweet us either with that hashtag London DevOps or at London DevOps as a DM, or good old-fashioned emails, organisers at londondevops.co.uk. So time for me to get out of the way and shut up and get to the main meat of the meetup. So I'm going to hand it over to Glenn. So Glenn Wilson is going to talk to us about focusing on DevSecOps. Going to run about 25 minutes ish, and yeah, I'll shut up and over to you, Glenn.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you again for inviting me along to talk at your meetup this evening. Been looking forward to this one, so hopefully I can give it justice. I'm just going to share my screen. You should be able to see my screen coming up any second now.
Yep, looks good.
Excellent. So yeah, so as I say, thank you for inviting me along. And tonight I just wanted to talk really around DevOps and how we secure DevOps. What I would like to do tonight is actually focus on DevOps and DevSecOps. We spend a lot of time looking at ourselves in DevSecOps, but I just wanted to start looking, going back to basics and start thinking about what we need to focus on in DevOps. So that's what I will be doing. So brief introduction. I am Glenn Wilson. I am an author of a book called DevSecOps, A Leader's Guide to Producing Secure Software Without Compromising Flow, Feedback, and Continuous Improvement. It is available on Amazon as a Kindle or as paperback. Good thing about paperback versions is you can use them as a monitor stand once you've read them, which is always a good thing. But yeah, please do check it out. And I'm also the founder of a small consultancy business called Dynaminet that focuses on DevOps and Agile security. So I'm going to start by asking the question, what is DevOps? So Matt showed a slide just a few moments ago, and unfortunately, Matt, I'm going to basically tell you why that's not quite right, but I hope you don't mind. I'm not offended.
No, don't demolish my world, man.
So, so here's how we portray DevOps. We've got the infinity loop with the various components of development and operations all working together in a seamless cycle. And if we want to talk about DevSecOps, then we look at how we secure each of those elements within the pipeline. And we call that DevSecOps. But well, hold on a minute, that's not quite right. I don't want to really talk about this infinity loop and security and how it fits into that. It's not what I think is DevSecOps is. So this is another way of looking at DevOps. In fact, Matt, you combine the two images, but this is the second way of looking at DevOps. This is a list of all the tools that you might use in DevOps and DevSecOps. Again, I don't think that DevOps is this, nor is DevSecOps this. So what is DevOps? Well, let's go back to basics. DevOps was coined in 2008, I believe, and it was it's been written about, and I think everybody's familiar with these three books. Gene Kim has done a great job in bringing DevOps and to the wider community with his excellent DevOps handbook and his two fiction novels, The Phoenix Project and his follow-up to that called The Unicorn Project. Brilliant books, and they do explain DevOps really well in them. So what does he explain? Well, first of all, he explains the three ways of DevOps. This comes through from the handbook itself. So this is the flow of dev into operations. Well, actually, this is the flow, systems thinking in terms of like everything we do from the moment of design right way through to operations and moving into the provide it to the customer. That is your flow, systems thinking. We also have the feedback loops. So basically, that's the second way, is the right to left feedback loop. And we need to be able to shorten and amplify those feedback loops in order to improve the way we do daily work. I'm not sure if there's someone on, not on mute. I'm not quite sure who it is, but there's a bit of background.
Yeah,
noise.
there's someone who keeps on unmuting, so I'm just going to eject you, I'm afraid, Alex. Not that Alex.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, thank you. So there we go. That's amplifying feedback loops. Demonstration there as well. And then finally, the third way is about creating a culture where we foster continuous improvement, continuous experimentation, and also learning from repetitive ways of doing stuff. So it's this continuous improvement, a continuous learning, and just repetition and practice. So that's how we describe the three ways. But also Gene Kim in his book, The Unicorn Project, discusses the 5 ideals of DevOps. And I'm just going to quickly run through these. You have locality and simplicity, the idea that you work in small local teams. We talk about the size of the team being 2 pizzas sized. He talks about focus, flow, and joy, which is about working with small components or small pieces of work streams that that allows us to focus on that one item, not too much context switching, which makes our lives a lot easier. Nothing worse than working on a large system, a large piece, and having to context switch all the time. It's not doesn't allow focus. It doesn't give us the flow that we need, and certainly isn't fun. And then the improvement of daily work is about playing down technical debt and making sure that we've got an environment that allows us to continuously improve the way we work. We don't want to be stuck on systems where we spend the whole day trying to fix an issue because there's so much complexity in what we're doing. And then we have psychological safety, which is about being open about the way we do stuff and not being fearful of outing particular ways of working that we're not happy with and so forth. So psychological safety is important. And then finally, it's about customer focus. Focus on your customers, not both externally and internally. So this is how Gene describes the DevOps in the 5 ideals. So where does security fit into all this? Well, I'm just going to take you back to the basics of what security is. I know this is a DevOps meetup, so I'm going to make the assumption that not everyone's familiar with exactly what security is. So I'm just going to give a quick 101 on what security is. Basically, it's about protecting data. And data could be anything from personal information. It could be proprietary information like source code and so forth. It could also be sensitive data like patient information and that sort of information. The key really is when you're protecting that data is to make sure that we have the ability to restrict who has access to that data. And that means that we would need to basically only make that data available to those who should be seeing that data. So we need to encrypt it. And that means that we provide this confidentiality to the data. We also want to make sure that people who alter that data are the people that are authorized to make changes to that data. We don't want data to be changed by somebody who has doesn't have the right to change that data. So that's what integrity means. And finally, your users, your customers want to have access to that data at the time they want it and when they want it. So it's making sure that data is available. And this triage of CIA has become the standard for what security is. And basically that is what security is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. However, there's also an element of trust in all this. And the trust is built around identifying who we're interacting with or what we're interacting with. Once we've identified somebody, and that could be through like a name badge or even an ID in a database, we need to then authenticate that person or the process. We need to say this process is who it says it is, who it says it is, or what it says it is. So we need to authenticate that particular person or that process to ensure that we can guarantee who that is. And that's through basically, well, the authentication process uses three things really to help you. Something we know, such as a PIN or a password. Something we have, which could be a credit card when we're using an ATM, or it could be a smart card if we're going through a barrier in an office, electronic token, such as an RSA token, or even your smartphone. This is something we have. And then finally, it's something we are. So that could be your facial recognition, it could be your fingerprints, or it could be the way you write your signature. These are all things that we are. And that's how we authenticate someone or somebody. And then finally, once we've got that authentication, we can then determine what that particular entity has authority to do or to see or to act on. So we have to make sure that there's authorization in the background there as well. And then the identification, authentication, authorization is okay, but you also need to have accountability. So we need to understand who does what when, or what does what when, so that we can look back on that particular type of interaction and make sure that we that there's trust in the whole system. So accountability is the final component of the trust model. So now let's go back to the 5 ways of DevOps, and let's start thinking about how security fits into this. So locality and simplicity is about reducing external dependencies. And the biggest friction point that most engineers have at the moment is with security. So work streams need to be responsible for their own security. There's no point in handing it over to another team to do some of the security stuff. So it's doing penetration testing or threat modeling and so forth. All that security stuff should be done locally and easily and simply within your own context of your own work stream. But also the work streams must to continue to improve their security capabilities. And that's a given. I think that in order to secure the products that you're developing, you need to have this continuous growth in the ability to do security. But conversely, security teams need to also provide the support for the work streams. As I said, there's a bit of friction, so we need to reduce that friction. And security teams need to step up. And that could be through collaboration. So basically working with a work stream that are delivering something, and they actually have a specific security problem they want to overcome. Security can then help that team and become an asset to that team, enabling that team to fix that problem. And also they need to start thinking about providing security as a service. So rather than being the naysayers, they need to come in and actually provide a service to the actual work streams that are doing their work. So what about focus, flow, and joy? Well, we need to discover and fix vulnerabilities as soon as we see them, not later on. Think about the old-fashioned waterfall method. We go through the whole process of design, development, testing, and then the penetration tester come in 2 days before we go live and say, no, you can't go live because we found all these vulnerabilities. That's the worst case scenario, but we still see the same sort of thing happening now. So what we need to do is we need to be able to fix and discover vulnerabilities much, much earlier. And to do that, we have things like SAS, and IAST, so static application analysis, dynamic analysis, and interactive analysis tools, which basically scans your code to identify potential vulnerabilities within that source code. We can also apply unit testing. So, you know, the good old agile methodologies that we've heard about in the past, test-driven development, you can actually write tests that verify or cert your security within the actual code that you're writing. We also need to make sure that our dependencies are secure. So we need to use software composition analysis, SCA, to examine our software that we've used, or open source software that we've used within our code, to make sure that it is free from known vulnerabilities. So a lot of the open source software that we tend to integrate into our own software, and I've heard stories of 80 to 90% of our own code is not actually our own code, it's actually open source code that we've integrated into our own software. So we need to make sure that's safe and secure. And there's plenty of tools out there that actually help you identify vulnerabilities within that code. And so you can take the option either fixing it, or you can, if you can't fix it, then you might want to replace that component, or you might even want to bake your own solution. Also, as we've moved into the world of containerization and more into the cloud infrastructure, infrastructure has become codified. So we need to make sure that we can validate our infrastructure code, and you know, just making sure that we're not configuring our systems to become too loose and too insecure. We also need to make sure that we're scanning our images and ensuring that any vulnerabilities we discover in our images are discovered before we deploy them to registries, or even once we've pulled them from registries, we need to check them again to make sure that we're all okay with it. And we also need to work in small batches. It's much easier to find a vulnerability when you're working on a small item of work than it is if you're working on a large piece of work. So make sure that you're working in small batches and test that small batch. So improving the daily work is about playing down technical debt. And that means that we need to fix as many vulnerabilities as we can. But the problem with that is that quite often when we run tools such as a SAS tool, we're presented with 1,000 vulnerabilities. Some of them are false positives, some of them are relevant. They're all categorized from critical to low. Which ones do you work on first? Well, I think you should be able to identify different types of vulnerabilities and identify the ones that give you the, you need to understand which ones are the greatest risk to your organization and prioritize them based on that. And once you've prioritized them, you can then start fixing them. You also need to make sure that you've got good architecture, a secure architecture as well. There's a lot of talk about moving from microservices away from monoliths. So the idea of microservices is that because they're smaller, it means that we can make changes quicker. So if we have to patch something, we can patch it much quicker. If it's a monolith, it could take weeks, even months before we get around to actually doing an upgrade, because there's so many moving parts that we could break so much of it. So by moving to microservices, we move into an architecture that's much simpler to secure. It also helps us create security boundaries around what we're developing. The last thing we want to do is create such a complex system with so many touch points that it becomes very difficult to secure those touch points. If we again work in small components, well, we can secure those secure components much easier. And also we need to codify our infrastructure. Making manual changes to infrastructure is one of the quickest ways and is one of the most prevalent ways of leading to a breach. So we need to codify our infrastructure so that we can test it. We can make sure that it is secure and we don't have fat finger syndrome where someone's gone in and manually configured a production website or production system, and as a result, they've created a vulnerability. And we need to improve the quality of the code that we're writing, whether it's application code or infrastructure code. We need to reduce code complexity. Makes it so much easier to identify security issues. We need to write cleaner code. Again, it helps us when the code is cleaner, it is easier to identify vulnerabilities within our code and easier to understand how the code works. And also, we need to be able to document our code as well. What I mean by that is having code that is not self-documenting per se, but certainly allows the person who's editing that code or reading that code to actually understand what's going on. You know, if you like have a component that's called X and or a class called X, and you've got a method called Y, and you're calling X.Y, it means nothing. But if you've got something that says that the class is called car and the method is drive, then you've got car.drive. That means a little bit more to somebody who's actually trying to edit that. And then we have psychological safety. We need to be open about the conversations we have about security. We need to be open about the security incidents that we face and talk about them, understand them, learn from them, rather than just pushing them under the carpet and pretending they never happened. We need to understand what vulnerabilities we have. I talked about SCA earlier, that looks at insecure dependencies that we might be using in open source software. Rather than just saying, yeah, we know about a vulnerability, you need to be able to fix it, and you need to be able to, make decisions about fixing those particular issues without actually having any culture of blame around it. Teams need to be accountable, not individuals, but teams. So when something goes wrong, everybody needs to come together to fix it. Not everybody stand around and pointing the finger at one person. You need a blame-free culture, and certainly you don't want to blame the intern. You need to be able to experiment and do things in ways that potentially could cause problems, but you need to be able to do it in a safe way and with confidence. So you might want to engineer security failure deliberately to see how you respond to it or how your systems respond to it. And certainly you want to validate your security assumptions as well. Ultimately, everyone is responsible for good security outcomes without any fear of repercussion. And then finally, there's customer focus. The key thing here is to make security a core product component. What I mean by that is actually giving the customer something that they can actually tangibly see that means that this product is secure. So that could be something like multi-factor authentication. Don't just use a username password combination if you want your customers to authenticate. Allow them to use multi-factor authentication. Use end-to-end encryption. If you're using something that carries sensitive information, the customer is going to be much happier than using end-to-end encryption. We've heard a lot of that recently with things like WhatsApp and Messenger, and they're sort of like IM tools. And you need to make security easy as well. There's no point trying to deliver something to your customers that your customers can't actually handle carefully, with any safety, because it's just too difficult. The more harder you make security for your customer, the more likely the customer is to make mistakes and therefore end up with an insecure profile that they're creating. You need to make security context an essential part of what you do as well. And what I mean by that is looking after your internal customer. So you need to secure the outcome of every work stream. You don't just pass whatever it is you're doing down to the next item in the chain or the next group in the chain and say, you've got to fix some issues here. No, it's down to you to fix the issues in the work streams that you're working on, and give your customer something that's secure. You need to protect your immediate customer. So that's basically what I think security means in DevOps. And when I talk about DevOps and DevOps security in my book, I talk about 3 layers. I talk about the security education being the foundation of everything we do. The more knowledge we have about security and the way we do security, the easier it is for us to secure systems. And once you've got that knowledge, you can secure your systems through the design process. But you can also test that through security automation, whether you're running security testing tools or security monitoring tools or any other type of security automation. you need to understand how that works. You need to understand the outputs of those automation tools. Otherwise, if you just apply security automation or security testing to everything you do, and you've never had that background in security education, you would not understand some of the results you're getting. If you're running a SaaS tool, how are you going to know what's a false positive or a false negative? How are you going to identify those? How are you going to identify whether something's relevant, whether the criticality is relevant or not? And how are you going to fix it once you've identified that problem? So education is the foundation in everything we do. But as with DevOps, we do things in incremental ways. So what I propose is, when we find, when we've prioritized our list of all the vulnerabilities we have, we want to group them. We want to understand what's our biggest one. And let's, for example, let's just take the OWASP top 10. The number one, it's been number one for years, probably 12, 13 years since OWASP first did the top 10. It's remained number one all the way through. And that is injection attacks or injection vulnerabilities. So let's take injection as an example. We find we got loads of injection vulnerabilities. So we want to focus on educating engineers about how to fix those injection problems, understand why is a problem, how to fix it, and how attackers might even exploit it, because that can also help engineers understand some of the vulnerabilities they have in their code. So once we've understood this injection problem, we can then look into our code, whether it be application code or infrastructure code, and start to apply our knowledge to secure the system, create better designs, do some validation, and do some sanitization of the data, for example, clean up our database, and do all these sort of things that will help us. But then once you've done that, you want to then test to make sure that that particular injection problem has gone away, or has at least been reduced. So you want to run your automation to test all that. And of course, when you run your automation, you're going to come up and find your second number one item, which now becomes your number one item. So you then prioritize against that one and go through the whole cycle again. Eventually, if you're taking the OWASP top 10, for example, you'll end up going through all 10 over a period of time with a very good understanding of each of those elements, because you've been able to focus on them. So that's my idea of how we integrate security into DevOps. I talk about this in a lot more detail in the book, if you are interested in reading it. So I've been Glenn Wilson, and if you do have any questions from tonight's talk, I'll be more than happy to answer you. I can be found at any of these locations, either through email or online. So do reach out to me. And I think now I'm going to hand back over to Matt, who I think is going to bring the panel in.
Absolutely am, yeah. Not quite so fast though, but yes, that's what we're going to do in a minute, definitely. Yes, Glenn, thank you so much for an excellent talk. Everybody, if you want to just come off mute, and I know it doesn't really work so well over Zoom, but give Glenn a round of applause. That'd be fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, that never works, but you know, it's the thought that counts. All right. Yeah, just a couple of questions. So there's one from Giles. Actually, no, that's just the one question at the moment, which is fine. Are you happy to do a couple of questions first, Glenn?
Yeah, of course I can. Yeah.
Cool. So Giles has used the E word. He's wanted to know, what do you see as are the challenges facing implementing DevSecOps at an enterprise level?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge there is scale, obviously. You also, in larger enterprises that tend to be heavily regulated, you have very strict processes. What I think the solution there is pretty much what I said towards the end there, is actually look at incremental changes to what you're doing. So, if you can look at a small team, a particular work stream, and look to secure that particular work stream, the output of that particular work stream, and make sure that you're working on that small scale, improve that point first, and then you can start to build out. In terms of the education, though, I think an education program is important, no matter any size of the organization, and across the organization as well. I mean, security education program isn't just sending someone on a course and saying, yeah, great, I've learned something, and 1 year later you've got to go on the same course again and learn the same thing, and you don't learn anything from that. It's just a tick in the box exercise, probably for your regulator. So you need a robust security education program, and that means providing a whole suite of education tools for your enterprise. So it could be, regular training. It could be subscribing to a video training channel. It could be providing literature, sending people to conferences, but also allowing people within their teams to spend time on learning as well, like within their teams. So that security education is certainly one of the biggest areas of where you can improve across the enterprise. The other stuff, it generally tends to be more difficult, especially tooling. Enterprises generally tend to want, deals with a vendor, and that vendor's tool might not necessarily be the right one for your every work stream. So it becomes very difficult to implement. Can be quite disheartening as well. But yeah.
And I guess the other aspect is that if you've got a security group, it's one thing to have a couple of security guys if you've got 10, 20, 30 developers, but when you're talking thousands of individuals. Yeah.
If you've got thousands of individuals, it becomes harder, which is the reason why I think you need to work small, and you need the buy-in from security itself, the security teams. They quite often sit in their own little tower, in their own isolated area. I think you need to break away from that. You need to experiment. It's about continuous learning and experimentation. You need to experiment and prove the outcomes. And if the outcomes don't work for the enterprise, then they don't work. But at least give it a go.
But automating those security processes so that you don't need security necessarily there, so they become more of an audit point. Yeah,
exactly. So penetration testing, for example, is done not at the end of a delivery, but because obviously deliveries are much more frequent, but you do it in a time boxed period, like let's say every 6 months or every month, every year, for example. And the outcomes, you already know what the outcomes are going to be because you've already found those vulnerabilities. You might have even fixed them by the time the penetration testers have actually done the report. That's where you want to be. But certainly you need to. I hate the term shift left, but you do need to.
You beat me to it.
You do need to find vulnerabilities earlier in the life cycle, not rely on the penetration testers or the bug bounty hunters if you can even go that far to try to find the vulnerabilities for you.
I guess moving away from actually having specific penetration testers, it just should become part of daily life for everybody. Thanks.
Good stuff. Thanks, Giles. Good question. Good chat. Cool. Robert Wells, you've got your hand up. Did you want to ask a question?
Yes, please. G'day there. Just interested. What approaches do you find work when you're migrating, especially large companies who have that security comes in with the Excel spreadsheet and gets a bunch of ticks in it towards the end? What is the best way to get them out of that mentality and show, like, I'm assuming here that you've set up your pipeline, so you've actually got that audit trace, so you can actually tie a specific release back through. You can see all the testing, all the quality gates that have been passed. What's your approach in sort of getting people out of that, well, we'll run a pen test 2 days before go live and that security, along with the Excel spreadsheet?
Yeah, it's a difficult mindset to shift, actually. It is a cultural change, a cultural way of thinking. And I think there's a lot of people that have actually become embedded in that way of working. I find that when you've got a security team that's that large, you do generally tend to find what I generally call good security people that understand what you're trying to do. And it's a good idea to bring those people on board and integrate them into, as I said, the security needs to step up and provide collaboration or security as a service. Maybe that's the way they need to start thinking of themselves as an enabler for security, not just as a as a team that does the governance, but actually enables teams to do stuff. You need to experiment with this, though. It's as it always is with DevOps. It's always a process of experimentation, and you need to have somebody who has that. It's like somebody within security that's willing to think outside the box. Different ways of doing security. Ultimately, it's about secure outcomes for your customers. That's what we're looking to achieve. It's not about tick box exercise. I mean, to give you a great example of this, SolarWinds. Yeah, SolarWinds, massive breach, caused all sorts of problems for their supply, for the customers, I should say. Key component of the supply chain. Well, they're ISO compliant, ISO 27000 compliant. They ticked all the boxes, they were secure, but no, they weren't secure because they got breached. So it's about security outcomes, not necessarily the ISO or any other sort of compliance. And I think if you can work with security people within an organization that are willing to work out the box and help you and enable you to develop more secure software, those exercises of penetration testing, let them do the penetration test, but don't let them stop you from releasing. Instead, you've got the evidence that you've created through the whole life cycle, through your testing that you've done, the outcomes of your testing, whether it be SAS, DAS, SCA, whatever. You have that evidence to send them. And if they want to do their penetration testing 2 days before you go live, let them do penetration testing before they go live. But provide the evidence that that actually they're wasting their time.
Yeah. Okay. So sounds a little bit like you've got to start doing that shift in mentality, like when you talk to people about adopting like a no-ops approach, or testers, where instead of actually running the tests, they're actually designing the tests and building the tests that will be run automatically. Okay, interesting. Just as a matter of interest, I'm now on my 3rd major corporation, dragging them out of the Excel tick in the box help. So it's always a slight challenge. So I was like, okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Fabulous. Thank you, Robert. Great question, great chat again. Okay, so last call before we open up the panel. Well, actually, I say it's the last call, but of course you could, when we're on the panel, you can ask Glenn some questions if you want to. But has anyone got anything else directly you want to ask to Glenn? Going once, going twice, sold. Okay, brilliant. So thank you again, Glenn, and great answers to the questions as well. So let's move on. Give Glenn a little brief breather and introduce the panel that we've got for you tonight. So very lucky to have. I think we have 3 other people, experts in the DevSecOps industry, on the line. What is this, 1997? So I'm going to introduce them. So firstly, I'd just like to go around the panel and I'll introduce you, and if you can give us just a little introduction to who you are, what you're about, other than what I say, that would be great. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Michael Mann, who is the founder of the DevSecOps London Gathering, a meetup run on very similar terms to how we run ours, London DevOps. So I'm delighted to welcome Michael. Do you want to say hello?
Hi there. Thanks for having me here.
Cool. Thank you. So next up, we've got Steve. I'm going to get the name wrong. Pronunciation. Sorry.
Go for it. Do it.
Jerry.
He's upset now. He's gone.
That's it. That's it. I'm out of here. No, that's fine. Everybody gets it wrong. It's only 7 letters, but it's Jaguar. It's sort of make it sound French and move your hands around a lot.
It's all the moving your hands around. So yeah. Steve. Yes, please do introduce yourself.
Sure. Yeah, I've been working in, I guess DevSecOps for quite a while. I'm currently with StackRock / Red Hat now as a cloud native and Kubernetes security specialist.
Brilliant. Thank you, Steve. And finally, I think we've got Jamal Harris on. Is that you there, Jay Harris?
That's me. Yep. Call me Jay.
Excellent.
Most people do.
Cool. Brilliant. So thank you to everyone for coming along. We, as I said, great talk from Steve on focusing in on DevSecOps. My personal exposure to this in my career so far has kind of highlighted DevSecOps as being, I know you hate the term, Glenn, shifting the stuff left, not going and knock on the security people's door 5 minutes before you want to release something and saying, is this okay? That sort of stuff. Obviously, a whole big industry spun up around DevSecOps. And yeah, Glenn, thank you so much for sharing the other definitions of DevOps. I usually preface my little thing about this is what DevOps is with, you probably heard like 100 different definitions of DevOps this evening. And it would be the one time I don't mention that somebody actually pulls me up on it. So I'm delighted that we've got lots of different definitions that have come out. Well, more that are focused around security. And they're all compatible. I think, you know, one person's view of it being slightly different to another person's is actually arguably good, and bringing all these things to the table is a fantastic thing. Yeah, we talked. Sorry, Glenn, you spoke a lot about kind of going back to basics on DevSecOps and how to rebase an organization that's maybe failing to do that in not a particularly good way. Can I just ask anybody on the panel if you want to come forward and tell me what sort of things would you be looking at doing to get, you know, really back to basics, or just agree with Glenn?
Actually, before anyone answers that question, I'd just like to point out as well that I don't know if this is just coincidental, Matt, but all the people on the panel, so Michael, Jay, and Steve have all contributed to my book. I don't know if that's a coincidence or.
Oh, I see what this is. All right, yeah. So
No.
basically, yeah, we just
I was very
hijack the
pleasantly
meetup to sell the book. Yeah, I understand.
I was very pleasantly surprised when I saw that. So I just want to offer, you know.
I'm imagining we're not going to have huge divisions, which isn't what I want. I want arguments.
Yeah.
But no, thank you for that, Glenn. It's a coincidence.
Yeah, it's a good one.
But we're from security. We can be annoying.
Yeah.
I don't think we have a choice, to be honest. It's just like part of us.
Does it have to be that way though? Is it? I mean, part of this for me is like, you know, I've sat in rooms with security people, and you can tell, you know, they know they're being annoying, and they don't really want to be annoying, but it just.
I think it
feels
does
like
have to be that way. Yeah, I think it has to be that way because security is separate, right? The people that are doing security all the time, we get into like work in a different way. We are always going to be separate, which is why something like DevSecOps is so important. Because if you are relying on external security people, it is my job to tell you that that you're wrong, right? I come in, so I'm a pen tester. I didn't really introduce myself, but I'm a pen tester for Digital Interruption. It's my job literally to come in and say, hey, these are all the things that you've done wrong. Your problem now. And so that's always going to be very people are always going to be angry about that. And we're never going to gel, unfortunately, which is why it's so important that our organizations are trying to take security into their own hands, so that they are, you know, to use this term, left shifting. So they are using security as just another measure of quality. You know, so that when they are doing their testing, you know, developers and testers are better at testing than security people are. So if actually they start to think about testing security issues as well, then you don't have to have someone come in at the end and tell you, hey, these are all the things you've done wrong. So yeah, I think it definitely, it does have to be that way, just because of the nature of how security happens at the moment. So we need to change that completely so that it is something that is embedded in the teams.
Do you have to be a musician to be a security guy though?
Yeah.
Maybe it helps.
Anybody else notice that? You all either got guitars or keyboards in the background there.
That's my son's. It's not mine.
It's because security people like to pretend that we're better at things than we are.
We're trying to be cool.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So sorry, someone's going to speak there.
I was just going to elaborate a bit on what Jay just mentioned there. I think historically security have been beaten up, which is why they're a bit defensive. But also the fact, I think pen testing has come up a couple of times, mentioned by Robert, Giles, etc., and was briefly discussed with Glenn. I think we need to understand that there are tests which can be done as part of your SDLC, so the whole shift left stuff, where either the central security team provides different capabilities for development teams to self-serve, mark their own homework, in addition with providing the right passing criteria or guardrails, right? But then it doesn't negate the fact for additional security assurance activities, such as pen testing. So I like to talk about inline testing. So all the good things that Glenn has talked about, but there's always room for out of band testing as well. So in the security industry, people may call it red teaming or even purple teaming. But there is room for that as well, because it's not a gated process. It's not inline. Your promotion of your code will still flow through as long as you satisfy the company's standard in terms of different types of quality testing or security testing, right? But you're not always going to catch everything, because no single security test is the silver bullet, right? Which is why we have SCA, we have IAS, we have DAS, we have SAS. So all the good stuff that Glenn mentioned already. So I think we need to be conscious and remind ourselves that there is still room for other types of security assurance activities, which could include manual pen testing.
I've now lost track of what the question was.
Did I talk too much?
No, totally not. No, I think we were kind of segueing from, what does back to basics look like to, what can you do in an enterprise? Can you automate everything? I think there's a whole lot of stuff in there. So that's just fine. I don't know. Did anybody want to riff back off of what Michael just said, or should we move the discussion?
I was going to add to that as well, that the role of the pen tester is changing as well. So I think, potentially could change. Jay might disagree with me here. I don't know.
Hope it doesn't change too much. I enjoy my job.
But a pen tester's role is not only just doing the pen testing, but it's also educating the engineers as well. I think that the pen testers could be a great asset to the engineering teams to help them understand where they're going wrong. So where a pen tester can actually find a vulnerability, they can also help the engineers fix those vulnerabilities and not make the same mistakes again. So I think the role of the pen tester can change slightly. As I said, I don't know whether, Jay, you agree with that or not.
I think it should. One of the issues that I face, to be honest, is that we are driven by kind of the industry and what people are asking for, but also what other pen test companies are providing. And at the moment, you can make a lot of money by just going in and providing a PDF that tells you what all the issues. So I think unfortunately there's going to be a lot of resistance from the pen test industry, and I see that. For some context, one of the things that we're doing as a company is we are making like DevSecOps tools, because I actually, I enjoy pen testing. What I don't enjoy doing is like pen testing the exact same apps every year with the exact same vulnerabilities. It's pointless. So we need to make tools that allow people to fix those before they even get to the pen test. But yeah, I think the industry, this whole security industry needs an overhaul, because I think it's based on money at the moment, and there is money in doing, pen testing and not helping to fix because we're not part of the teams.
That's funny. Can I riff off what Jay just said? Going back to Glenn's 3 layers of education, design, and automation, there is a culture change that needs to happen, not just within, as security people, we like to say that DevOps culture needs to maybe change to understand security, and we have to work to make sure that we enable security to be easy. But along what Jay was saying, I think some of us have experience working with or for vendors. The vendors have to also take responsibility for that. Like, we have to be making tools that does fit into this modern culture with ease and can be pulled by the DevOps teams, so that the friction is reduced. So it's not just a case of the organizations themselves creating that culture and security teams understanding that culture. It's a fact that we can sometimes be limited by the way the vendors are providing with the automation, the tools we have to work with.
Yep, definitely.
So it's interesting how Jay, you talked about how you do pen tests and do the same thing year on year in. All this stuff that happens like traditionally or could be described as happening at the end of a development cycle. And I also wanted to pick up on like the thing about security people being annoying. It's it's absolutely true. And I'm wondering, is it just as simple as getting people to see things from the same perspective? I mean, I often a lot of my work involves just in general, not especially in regard to security, involves talking to lots of people who are doing different things and working towards different objectives, and therefore aren't working together. I mean, the classic one is devs are trying to develop stuff quickly, and they want to like move fast and break things, and ops people are measured on so the devs are probably measured on velocity of stuff they get out. Ops people are measured on uptime, and therefore they don't want anything to change. Is it as simple as to get rid of that annoying thing as just getting security better on the table with devs, or is that just something that we can never actually achieve?
So,
Did that make any sense?
If I could answer this, so yeah, it makes total sense, but it's not a simple thing, because the people that are doing security at the moment, we like breaking things. It's not really, we don't make things, we're not developers. We share a lot of the same skill sets, but I think the mentality you come across, like you put into it, is different. I think what we need to do really is just kind of accept that there are some people like this. There are some people that want to break things and show off, and that is just how they want to work. But actually, we can use that in a more useful way if we're not relying on them for security. So what I would love to see more companies doing is maybe having some, like, I don't really think of the right phrase, but like continuous red teaming type stuff. Think of it more like maybe even bug bounties. So that going on, maybe that replaces the pen test, but that can only happen if things are secure when they're going out the door. So if we do everything we can to make sure that it's secure in like as early as possible, then the people that want to break things and they want to be that kind of hacker type person, let them do it, but manage it in a different way. Because at the moment it's like this middle ground where we, like, when we release a product, we have to go through these gatekeepers, we have to go through security, and they're the ones that are, they've got this weird mentality where they, we like to make people cry and stuff, and there's no option at the moment but to go through those, and I think that's where the problem is.
Actually, sorry, that's one of the best aspects on, like, the best relationships that I've had with test teams, is where it becomes a game, where they say, I'm going to break your latest release, and you're saying, no way. That really gets to it, where it just becomes fun, where, like that work with a team where the testers suddenly started all dressing in all black, just as a bit of a lark, which was quite fun. But I was intrigued. Do you think, Jay, that pen testing would ever disappear completely?
I don't. But to take your point, like, I think what you said is really, really important. That kind of like competition type thing is really, really good. And so I have worked with companies to try and help them with some like DevSecOps stuff. And the competition between teams is one of the big ways that we can actually get people to embrace it and to they like seeing like green ticks on things, and their team is doing better than the other team. I think with pen testing, the problem is that they're not part of the team. It is like, it's often a third party that's coming in. So there is no way you're going to get that competition, and because you need the relationship first to be able to kind of use that. But I think pen testing won't disappear. I hope that it changes though. I hope that it's, as I said before, it's not something that like has to be done before something goes live. Maybe for like certain applications that need to have someone looking at it with, like, with human eyes, with a specific like skill set. So having those like people doing pen testing on those things, not just like, oh, here's this brochure application, we need to get it pen tested because we need to get it ticked off the list. So yeah. I don't think it will change. I don't think it will disappear, but I hope that it changes a little bit.
Okay, or maybe selling it as just like to the team as a fresh pair of eyes coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah, with that focus.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, so one thing that I really hope that we do see is like at the moment there's lots of students coming into security, into pen testing, and I think this is like the first time we've really seen that people like wanting to be like pen testers and security consultants, because in the past people more like they fell into it. I fell into it, you know, it wasn't a plan of mine, but now we are seeing young people like trying to get into it. And I would love if there was like a different type of role, maybe not pen testing, but a role for those people that are interested in security, but maybe they don't have the same like background as I do. So, you know, I've been doing this stuff since I was a teenager. A lot of people nowadays, you know, that they go to university, that they've got a few years of experience. They're not quite ready to maybe move into pen testing, but they could definitely have experience to help organizations with security. So I'd like to see that kind of evolve into like a new role as well. And then maybe people can move from there to pen testing if they want, or I hope to actually moving with like more involved with teams and security champions and security experts within organizations.
Yeah, that'd be good, mate.
What we're trying to do as well, some of the people who work within the pipeline, and it's been mentioned a few times, the idea of shifting left. Inadvertently, we're trying to make pen testing more interesting and more fun, so that you're not doing the repetitive work that actually we really should be finding earlier. So pen testing probably will never go away. Some of the results I've seen from pen test reports are like mind-blowing. So there's just things that you can't find through automation and security testing. But I think what we really have to start doing, and maybe this is getting back to Matt's question. I've forgotten the question. That's not wrong. It's not bad. Was coming along the lines of just some of the examples in the chat have been really good. People have mentioned GitLab and GitHub Actions and advanced security, things that where some of the vendors that are more DevOps focused are doing some of the security things for you, or just making it there on a plate for you, making security easy for DevOps. I was asked once recently, should a cloud be secure or should a cloud be securable? And it's a little bit like the same kind of premise. A cloud is providing you something, cloud provider is providing you something securable. It's up to us to provide DevOps with something that is easily securable. And I think there is that mentality and the culture change and those 3 layers that Glenn talks about that can make that happen.
Great, good stuff, Robert. Thank you. Kapil, did you want to come off mute and ask a question?
Hey guys, yeah, I'm Kapil. So basically, I just want this fantastic, interesting conversation. I mean, today at work we were talking about security and things like that. I'm an infrastructure engineer by trade. I'm looking to break into DevOps. Just want to ask your panelists, like, what are some good ways to start breaking into DevOps? Basically, I'm doing Cloud Academy. So I'm doing a couple of courses at the moment. I'm learning a bit of Puppet from CBT Nuggets. So I'm just wondering what's the best way to start bridging into DevOps, even DevOps security probably.
I think security would probably be the best thing to talk about there. We can talk more generally about DevOps in a minute, but yeah, panelists, if you want to talk about, being not necessarily just getting into DevOps, but going into DevSecOps. Any tips for Kapil?
I think Glenn's got a training course you could tap up.
No, I think it's more than just training. It's about doing it as well. You know, DevOps isn't it's not a practice. It's a way of it's a cultural thing really. And DevSecOps is just was also part of that cultural change. It's an individual can't do DevOps. It needs to be done as a group, and that's the reason why I was saying earlier, you take a small team and you go through the whole process of doing like the DevOps piece and then adding security into it as well. Someone actually asked, I think it was Pip who mentioned on the chat earlier, said that DevSecOps shouldn't be a thing, it should just be DevOps. But actually DevSecOps to me makes sense because security is such an important part of what we do, and it's been the most neglected thing of what we've done. So if you want to break into that, it's actually understanding what security means to engineering and to the outcomes for the customer. So, you know, learn what tools are available for security. So you're an infrastructure person. So I'm assuming that you're moving into infrastructure as code. Maybe you're doing containers. So you might want to start looking at, okay, how can I build a container in code and keep it secure? So Steve could probably help you with that one. And looking at infrastructure as well, you know, like, you know, how can I build my infrastructure using code and keep that code secure? In doing so, how can I test that? Then you start to create the mentality of what DevSecOps is about, or even what DevOps is really. But just focusing on your, you know, creating your own skills is around just doing it, just doing DevSecOps. And I personally don't think there are DevOps or DevSecOps roles. You're a developer or an engineer that just so happens to work in a DevOps culture or a DevOps environment. So, you know, so I'd hone your skills on security, but do it in a DevOps way.
Okay.
So keep on learning, keep on adapting, keep on, you know, working in just small iterations of applying security in a codified way in what you're doing.
Because like I was talking to one, like, was a chief security officer today, CSO, and then I was asking about security, and he was saying, like, start with something basic like a CompTIA Security Plus course to begin with, just to break into security, and then you can then start and then fire up a VM and start playing around with different ways, you know, apps are penetrated and the way infrastructure is penetrated, and go from there really. Yeah,
and so looking at it from the other side, looking at actually how you know, how our system could be vulnerable. This is where, say, someone like Jay can help. Is he can identify those vulnerabilities and give you tips on how to fix it. So any penetration tester, you know, should be able to do that. And then you can start thinking, okay, how can I make this secure? How can I stop this person from attacking my systems? I mean, I mentioned in my talk that fat fingers is a big problem with like the like, let's call it the Iron Age infrastructure, where people just manually go on, make a configuration change, you know, create an administration role or something, apply, you know, give someone access to that admin role, and then forget about it, and then that person leaves and suddenly you know, that person's got access to the system, you know, after being sacked. You know, there's those sort of things that can just be easily done, and it'd be difficult to then find that. But if you've got it in code, it's much easier to you know, manage those sort of changes than if it's done manually. So yeah, that's what DevOps means to me, and the security side of it is actually putting the security into, you know, making you doing it in a secure way, and how can you keep the bad guys out?
Okay, I see. I mean, would you say best thing to do is try and get into infrastructure? Obviously, infrastructure engineer, which I am. Try and find a company that the culture is more DevOps, and then work it way from infrastructure, which is operations, into DevOps eventually, basically.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, what about the other guys? I mean, I've said a lot here, but what about the others? How would you? I was
just going to suggest, Capel, have you ever read Martin Fowler's papers on continuous integration?
No, I've not read that.
Okay, yeah, because I was lucky enough, I got asked to come over to the UK to work on a system for Qantas and British Airways. And there was a guy working there who's seriously off with the pixies. And he read, like, because I hated it, my background's development. And I just was complaining, bloody thing keeps blocking me. And Charlie just laughed and gave me a copy of the paper from Martin Fowler, and you understand the philosophy. And I suddenly realized, oh my God, yes, I'm actually fixing stuff while my head is in the problem space, as opposed to having a tester come and tap me on the shoulder a week later. You know, that code you did last week, it's got an issue in it. You know, it so increases your productivity. So I'd highly recommend reading that paper, and also having a look at his talk on continuous, is it continuous delivery, continuous deployment? It's
CD, CI, basically.
Yeah, and then you get an idea of the philosophy and this whole shift left, early notification. What else can we put in there to fulfill the buzzword bingo? Throw in a bit of AI. some blockchain, some machine learning. Yeah.
AI.
I'm just being facetious now, mate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Seriously, I'd highly. And the other one is the project books by Nick Kim, Gene Kim. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's anyway. That's.
If you read the introduction to the, I think it's a Unicorn Project. Gene Kim, he invites a lot of the people that are associated in the industry, some big names in the DevOps industry, to describe their aha moment. And I think that's very, very useful, because it really helps you. What was it that they discovered that because it is a mindset, it's a culture.
Mindset and culture. So DevOps is more about mindset and culture more.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
And those books that Robert just mentioned, so they're great resources, but there's thousands of resources out there. IT Revolution, which is Gene Kim's publishing house. He has a number of really good books that don't necessarily talk about DevOps, but allow you to think about how DevOps might work. Like Team Topologies doesn't talk about DevOps per se, but gives you that whole idea of working locality and simplicity, focus, flow, and joy, psychological. It talks about what I was in a different way, but it's such a simple concept. The Team Topologies book. So reading something like that, it can help you get that. Oh, I get it. I understand what DevOps really means now. So yeah, but definitely, it is a don't think of it as I want a DevOps role, because there are a lot of resourcing people like to use that word in job titles, but I don't really think there is a DevOps role. You're either an engineer working in a DevOps environment, or you're an engineer working in a non-DevOps environment.
Yeah. I mean, I'm more engineer working in a non-DevOps environment. Most of my roles have been all based around. I've done a few cloud migration projects and stuff like that, such as 365 and things like that. So it's like now think about, okay, where do we take my career now next, sort of thing. So I'm dabbling in a couple of things, trying to work things out, like where do I want to go? Should I go security? Do I want to go more, Azure infrastructure or AWS or Google Cloud Platform or Kubernetes or Docker? There's so many buzzwords at the moment.
There's so much there, isn't there? Absolutely. Yeah, loads and loads and loads. Okay, cool. Good. Good luck with a couple. Great question.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, so let's just touch on that a little bit. So yeah, we talked about Gene Kim books. A few mentions of those tonight. Martin Fowler as well. Similar kind of attitudes around the origin of Agile. I got introduced to Martin Fowler, for example, through our friend Nick Farrier, who many of us will know here, big proponent of his work there. And I think, one of the key things here is that DevOps now is in its more pure sense is it's a way of thinking. It's a cultural thing. Do we all think is there much nuance to discussing if DevSecOps in its own way is also the same sort of ballpark there, or is that in danger of just going the way of being like, well, let's find the DevSecOps tools that we need to buy and hire some DevSecOps engineers, and then jobs are good? And what's the panel's thinking on that?
Well, I think when you said DevSecOps engineer. Sorry, who was that?
Sorry, say again, Steve.
I interrupted somebody, but I cringed a little when you said hire a DevSecOps engineer.
That was deliberate.
Yeah. Okay. Good. It was. I think if I played off what was just being said and what you're talking about is DevSecOps like DevOps in terms of culture. I think it's a. God, I used to cynically describe DevSecOps as like a self-penned invitation to the DevOps party, so that we could somehow be a part of it. But I think really, like deep down, we're just trying to create some empathy. There is an ability for security to understand DevOps and vice versa, so that they understand the challenges that security teams are trying to get through as we adapt to the velocity of change and through cloud transformation or whatever it is that's driving us into this space. And the same thing, so that we don't necessarily have to be the department of no. We can be the department of enablement. We can show you how to make things happen faster. So I think DevSecOps has kind of created or been born out of an effort. But I don't know that it necessarily is going, the resulting culture is going to be quite the same. And I think, I guess, to go back to what was it Pip said in the chat, eventually it will come back to just being DevOps and we can do away with it. That would probably be an ideal outcome in 50 years.
We'll all be dead by then. All right, excellent. Okay, good stuff. Time has raced on. We're at 7:30 already, so I think we're going to wrap up in a few minutes. Yeah, we've had a great discussion here. I didn't go any way in the direction I thought it would, which is a planner's nightmare, but I quite enjoy that. That's brilliant. I just want to go around everyone. If we're right, start with Michael, just with any kind of closing thoughts on what you think. Any of the highlights from what we've discussed, or B, things that you want people to take away, Michael?
It's such a broad topic, and there's a lot to get your head around. And as we were discussing with Capel, it's knowing where to focus. So I think meetups like this are great, where you can meet other people with different backgrounds and experience, and you can start understanding different elements of the bigger scope. And over time, hopefully, you'll find the sweet spot for yourself where you can actually focus a bit more and start to specialize. I think everybody within the panel are more than happy to continue with this conversation. As Jay mentioned in the chat, you can reach out to us on Twitter or through LinkedIn, and happy to discuss this further. I mean, we're all learning. We're probably only a few chapters ahead of you guys. Well, maybe I'm only a few chapters ahead of you guys. So happy to discuss and learn and move this forward.
Brilliant, thank you, Michael. Yeah, it's probably worth pointing out that so London DevOps is obviously an audience that doesn't have SEC in the name. Some of this, I think, a lot of people on the call are kind of on the periphery of the SEC part of this, and yeah, I think it's been a great learning experience that we've only scratched the surface of. So yeah, cool. Yeah, Jay, did you want to say anything to wrap up?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I'm probably talking like preaching to the choir here, but like I think the community aspect of things like DevOps specifically, because it is quite new, people are trying to figure it out as they go. Like the community aspect is super important. If you are looking to learn about security as well, there are so many groups that are putting like content out there for you to learn from, and yeah, as I said, figuring out kind of as we go. So yeah, anyone that is looking to try and improve their skills, like this type of thing is usually a really good way. You can learn more from speaking to someone that is trying to do the same thing than just what you can read from a book. So yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
Brilliant, thank you, Jay. Yeah, couldn't agree more. It's yeah, it's like nothing else. Just talking to somebody with a different viewpoint, and who ultimately wants you to succeed, and finding the common ground. It's yeah, that's what it's all about, right? Cool. Anything to close from you, Steve?
Sure. I'm gonna just double down on my empathy thing I just said. I think it's great if you're in security to come to meetups like this, because you get to know the community, you get to understand their pain, you get to hear their questions and look at the chat. It's always fascinating. And then the same idea in reverse. Michael has DevSecOps London Gathering, and there's a lot of cross-pollination we can do just culturally and community-wise to get to know each other better. I think that's a great start.
Fabulous. Bless you. Okay. Yeah, just I'll do another shout out for the London Gathering. Apologies, Michael. I'm not sure if you're still meeting regularly in the pandemic age, or if you have meetups scheduled, or
Yes, we're running. We parked it last year for obvious reasons, but we rebooted since January. I haven't released the event for this month, but I'll do that during this weekend. But shameless plug then. It'll be Wednesday the 24th. Is that?
It sounds
have I got
definite.
the date right?
28th.
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 Sorry. Thank you, Glenn. Yeah, so Wednesday the 28th. So we'll be covering... Glenn, help me.
Security Chaos Engineering from
That's it.
Aaron Reinhardt, who he's also contributed to the Chaos Engineering book by Casey Rosenthal and Nora Jones, who both worked at Netflix. So really looking forward to that one.
Brilliant. Sounds fantastic. Steve just mentioned another meetup there, which I'm guessing is a Kubernetes one in Mountain View, possibly.
It's actually all over the place. That's the Mountain View version. Because it's they're kind of cityless at the moment. It's all virtual. So we just created ones in London, and this is one. I should have mentioned this. This is one I'm involved with. I'm an idiot. But this is today. So if you've got nothing going on, this starts in half an hour.
There you go. Perfect. If you already got this immersed in security and DevSecOps, then carry on. You got 27 minutes before you to go and get some dinner. Hamad, the link is in the chat, and I've just 3 messages up from Steve. Cool. Okay. Well, let's wrap up there. Oh, sorry. No, there's one person. Most importantly of all, I haven't asked to give their closing comments. Anything else you wanted to say, Glenn?
No, just I mean. DevSecOps and DevOps, for me, it is the same thing as a cultural thing. Securing DevOps is the way I try to, portray it. Just it's just a continuous learning and a continuous improvement process. And the more you learn about this, the easier it becomes. And finally, as well, I just want to say a big thank you to the whole group for inviting me along, and thank you to the panel as well for supporting me on tonight's talk. I've really enjoyed tonight, so thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much, Glenn. All right, so let's wrap up. I want to thank the panel. Thank you so much to all of you for participating. Big thanks to you, Glenn. Thank you so much for speaking and paneling and answering questions as well. Sorry, I'm just distracted by the dog who's now trying to hide a bone in the bed. So yeah, also thank you to everyone who's asked questions. So to Robert, to Kapil, to Giles, Pip, all sorts of other people. Apologies if I didn't name check you there, but thank you so much. It's all those contributions that make this meetup as real as it could be, being on a virtual platform for the foreseeable future. So yeah, we're going to be running London DevOps again in about 1 month's time or so. We don't have any of the details lined up for that yet, but there'll be an announcement relatively soon on that. So yeah, that's it really. I want to thank all the sponsors, thank the co-organizers, Alex Dover, Jack Moore, Mark Cluett, who is here. He's finished his work with the HashiCorp France user group. So he's been here. Hey, there you are. Great to have you here, buddy. And again, yeah, thank you to all the panelists and to Glenn for speaking. So that's it. I'm going to try and A, calm down the dog, and B, go and get some food now. I will leave the chat, the Zoom open if anybody wants to congregate and socialize. Feel free to do that, or otherwise, if you want to have a break, then that's absolutely fine. Yeah, so that's it. Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed it. Give us some feedback. See you at the next one. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Yes.
Thanks, Matt. See you guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you guys. All the best.
Yeah. Bye.